Well, welcome to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Big Tom Perkins, along with Dr. Cameron Meyerly. And I don't know about you, Cam, but it is coming time for breeding.
Yeah, I know last time we were commenting on how nice and cool it was at night and had mentioned that the heat wave was working its way through Ohio or getting ready to move through Ohio, and it's certainly been here and it's been pretty toasty out.
Yep.
We've got some places that look more like the Dust Bowl than than Central Ohio, but it's been hot and dry and not a whole lot of fun. Been dealing with the lack of precipitation and uh, led us down a rabbit hole of calling the FSA office and figuring out some of the drought programs that they have in place. And unfortunately, and I didn't know this, maybe you didn't know this either, for those drought relief programs, the entire county has to be under a severe drought calculation, which means we will not qualify because if you'd go 7 miles north of us, everything is bright green and they've had
Uh,
just a normal year of precipitation. So we
yeah.
are limping by here and making it work, but it's been hot. Those Rams have been kind of pacing the fence, and we're really just trying to keep them cool and keep them in good condition so that we can get them out and get them breeding here before too long.
Yeah, we've got 55 ewes on the dry lot that's been being flushed. And they look pretty good. So we're kind
Yeah,
of
and we've
excited
we've
about
talked
those.
flushing before on the podcast.
Yeah.
What was your protocol this time around?
It's pretty much the same as it's been. Just brought them in. It's not great quality hay. It really isn't, but it's not horrible hay either. It's got some alfalfa in it. But it is giving them that 1 pound of corn per head per day. And that seems to have worked really well for us. And I think it's all about just raising that plane of nutrition. If you can do that, then it kind of tricks that you into thinking, hey, life's pretty good and we're going to be able to support twins. And so you end up with a whole lot more twins than you do singles.
Yeah, and when we're thinking about raising that plane or increasing that plane of nutrition and what it means in that flushing phase, biggest category is energy.
Yep.
And so fortunately, we've got a lot of energy in our corn product that does just that. We'll flush those ewes up. A pound per head per day, I think, is advisable. I know in some accelerated systems, there are some producers out there feeding up to 2 pounds of corn
Yeah.
per day, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot of feed. But again, those are animals that were coming off of lactation, dried up, and then they're turning them around very quickly. And we're talking about flocks that are lambing, over 200% in those accelerated systems, and the nutrient demand in those sheep is very, very high. So definitely the 1 pound I think is adequate for the class of sheep that you're operating, and a little bit on how you get those animals transitioned. So they came off of pasture,
Yep.
and then how far ahead of breeding season are you trying to flush them?
I'm starting that about 3 weeks ahead. Because you can't just bring those ewes in and start feeding them 1 pound of shell corn because you're going to have stomach problems for sure. And so you need a bit of a transition period before you can get them up to that 1 pound. So in years past, we've always started off with a 1/4 pound per head for 3 days and then moved that up to a 1/2 pound for 3 days, then 3/4 of a pound for 3 days. This year we did it or a 1/4 pound for 2 days and then a 1/2 pound for 2 days and then 3/4 pound for 2 days. And then they were on to the 1 pound. So instead of taking 9 days to get to the 1 pound, it took us 6 days and we didn't have an issue. So we're thinking that's probably what we will do going forward.
Any signs of discomfort at all or
No, didn't see
soft
anybody
stool?
no, didn't see anybody having problems at all with it. Um, didn't stand around and watch, uh, manure being dropped and so on, but didn't, certainly don't see any signs on the tails or anything like that anybody's had any kind of problems with it. So it seems to have gone pretty well. And I think at times too that this hay it wasn't made later. It's just we had an earlier spring this year, so the hay is more mature than what I like to feed. And I think maybe that can kind of help with that as well, kind of slow things down and that going through those sheep, and so they don't have quite the stomach issues. And I think maybe if it was lusher hay, there might have been an issue with it. I didn't think of that going forward, but that's what we looked
Yeah,
at.
and I definitely think, it's second what you just said on the fiber that you're
Yep.
putting in there. Something that is buffering a
Mm,
buffer in that rumen and making sure those sheep are staying healthy. That's the hard thing with breeding sheep in dry lot or in a barn is, what how high of quality of nutrients are we trying to put into these animals? And ultimately, I've talked to a number of people that their thought is, well, I hate to get rid of to feed my good hay, my
yep.
second or third cutting hay, because I'd like to save that for lactation
Yep.
next spring.
Yep.
Well, I'd also argue that, the more nutrition we can get into those animals, our goal is an increased ovulation rate, an increased drop of those eggs to be fertilized. And so, it can't be overlooked. When we talk to people about flushing or any extension article that talks about flushing, a lot of times the discussion happens 6 weeks ahead of that first breeding date or 60 days ahead of breeding date. And a lot of that kind of the target mark is 30 days ahead of that ram turnout that we'd like to increase nutrition. Well, we suggest that 6 weeks or 8 weeks, that 60 days, because by the time most of our producers get around to it, it ends up being 30 days. So if
Yeah.
we tell people, oh, it's 6 weeks, well, we're pretty sure that we'll get 4 weeks of increased nutrition into those animals. So the fun thing, I think, and it probably started well before even the flushing portion of your breeding program, that's selecting rams and figuring out, what your goals are for the following lamb crop. Your 2025 lamb crop. When did that start and kind of what's your methodology for working through what rams you're going to use and how are you going to create those mating decisions?
Well, I probably identified the goal probably 3 or 4 years ago, and the main goal
Okay.
was uh, to push get as much parasite resistance into these sheep as we could. And so we're always looking really hard at that, but we're also looking at post weaning weights. We want those to be not over the top, but we want those to be, pretty decent weight because, we know from the cattle industry, if we keep pushing those post weaning weights, any ewes that we're going to retain for breeding are going to be bigger than the ewes previously. And we don't want great big giant ewes because we don't have to feed them when they're going to eat a whole lot more when they're not nursing. So there's a much point in having great big giant ewes. So looking at breeding, I started in the spring looking for a really parasite resistant ram that had pretty decent post weaning weight. Then I found one down in Georgia, from Roxanne Newton, and we just named that ram Rox. I'm not sure she'll approve of that, but she's going to find out now. And so we got him, picked him up. She brought him up to EAPK Symposium, and then we brought him on home from there. So pretty excited about using him. And then we use that. Is it Sheep Tools? Is that the name of the?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it is an estimating breeding value tool. And so it's an estimation of the estimated breeding values. And that's a fun tool to use if you're an NSIP because you can stick your NSIP numbers in there and it'll give you what should occur on paper. And that's the big thing to remember is that this is just what it should look like on paper. Then you still have to pull all your data, to prove those numbers out. And it's been my experience that they're pretty darn close. And there's only been a few that were really far off, and I think that was really more because the RAM that I used wasn't quite as good as we thought he was going to be. So I think had that RAM been proven out, I think those numbers would have been a lot closer on that. But that part is super fun. And so I took that Rocks RAM and these 55 U's that I have and looked at that Rocks RAM, looked at my Curtis RAM, looked at my 205 RAM, and then I have an ELR RAM that's really just good for putting weight on sheep. His lambs grow like crazy, but I'm not too happy. He makes a great terminal sire. And if you have small sheep and you want bigger sheep, he'd be a ram to use. So, but that's not the boat we're in. And I put those ewes in there one at a time and then make a breeding decision from there. And so I would like to breed every sheep I have to this Rocks ram, but that's just asking way too much of that ram lamb. So I basically put those numbers in and said, okay, we're gonna breed every ewe that should give us a negative 80 or better to that ram. And the first time through, that gave me 23 rams, or 23 ewes, I guess it was. And then I made another list of everyone that didn't occur, um, and said, and made the heading called limbo. And so those sheep were in limbo until I could figure out who I was going to breed those to. And then I went back through and I started looking, and it's like Curtis is not going to give me the parasite resistance that I want. Not to mention I've got a boatload of his daughters, so they were way too closely related. And 205 wasn't going to get it on some of these. And so I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, I've got a pen full of ram lambs, and there's some pretty good ram lambs in there. And I was going to sell all these ram lambs, and I thought, well, maybe I just need to go back through and see what's in there. And so I settled on paper. I settled on two lambs, and then I went out and looked at those two lambs and picked one of them. And that's BTP 466. And he's a little bruiser of a ram. He looks really good and his numbers are good. And so I started back through and said, okay, anything that comes up a negative 65, I think it was, or better, is going to go to him. And
This is the first ram that you've kept to breed with inside the flock, correct?
since I've been in NSIP, the first 2 years I was in, I picked two rams and they were both horrible picks. They were just absolutely terrible. The the worst breeding
Okay.
the first year wasn't quite so bad. I mean, I only had 11 ewes, and then I think I had 6 or 7 ewe lambs. And so I picked a ram lamb, and he didn't look too bad. He was a single. And so of course, he was gonna look better than everybody else. And so I picked him and he did okay. And then the next year I picked a little ram lamb. He was all fuzzy. And I thought, oh, no big deal. He'll shed out later on. And he would have been a son of the original ram that I used. And every one of his daughters, or every one of his lambs, were born very tiny and they did not shed. And so I had a handful of woolies running around here for a long time, and every one of them has the year 18 in their ear tag. And I think I'm down to just one of those left. So since NSIP and getting a better idea of what I think I should be doing, yes, this will be the first one I've used out of my flock. So
That's exciting.
kind of excited and kind of terrified all at the same time.
Oh, he'll be fine.
I keep thinking
He'll be
back
fine.
keep thinking back to the ram that I first picked, or the second ram that I picked. And I was like, oh, what a terrible decision that was. And then
That's funny.
when
No, and that's something.
I did the same thing in 2018. I guess that was another ram of mine that I used, and those lambs were just terrible. They were just hideous. They didn't grow. So I didn't keep a single ewe lamb out of that 2019 crop. I sent everything to the sale. Took a beating on them because they were just terrible looking lambs. I said, "That's it. I'm done. I've got to buy outside genetics, and I'm not getting it done." So I'm excited to see what he does, and then anything that fell below that mark, then I'm breeding terminal, and that's that Suffolk Ram. His name's Sam, so he's Sam the Suffolk Ram. So Sam's gonna have fun. So now we
Nice.
have those all laid out as to what's supposed to happen. So they're coming in. Um, they're coming in this Saturday. So it'll be, I don't know, was that September 1st or August 31st, but he'll be this Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't want to gloss over the because we've talked about it a bunch on pulling out those higher end maternal individuals that
Mm,
line up with what your future direction is and breeding those to the best sheep that you have in the ram barn. And then I also identifying sheep at the bottom end that still have value that are operating in your production system and doing well.
yep,
Uh, but we don't need ewe lambs out of them. And what
yep,
we do need are lambs that are going to produce carcass traits and uh, traits that are advantageous to
yep,
selling uh, in the spring. And the reason in the spring is because this is your February lambing group. Your goal is to lamb them out in 17 days,
yep,
one heat cycle.
yep.
And from that, we should be able to hit, you should be able to hit a premium market right after weaning, and hit those markets at a timeline that works for getting sheep out of the barn in a rapid fashion, and also at a time of year that our prices should be significantly higher,
Yep.
because our demand is higher. And so, I think we go back to how you got there, and that was 3, 4 years ago. What you just said, you set the goal of, I want to produce sheep that have parasite resistance and are maternal and are moderate framed that work in a pasture based system.
Yep.
And the ones that don't fit that box just to the letter can stick around, and they're going to produce lambs in a commercial sense. But
Mhm.
you start with that, and then every year, that's the overarching goal.
Yep.
Your productivity goal for the operation long term. And then I think within year, we have more specific goals. So, that's the big overarching goal. And then you go through and you say, well, Curtis has done a really nice job on the maternal side of things, but parasite resistance, because you have the numbers to play with, he's not going to get it done this year for the sheep that we need. He's a two generation type ram,
Mm,
meaning I can produce generation one, and that generation is phenomenal for internal use. But if your goal is to sell seed stock and to sell sheep, it will take a second generation with a ram of higher genetic value, higher genetic merit, to produce lambs that are of higher quality that
mhm.
you can sell. Um, and so it's kind of like, well, you already have a bunch of daughters out of him. Let's cut out the middleman. I mean, that's a 2 year process
Yep.
to get sheep that are worth selling. We've been in a similar situation, uh, selected very heavily, very focused on parasite resistance, again on paper, and those sheep visually are. Uh, I'm a fan of them. They're very moderate. They're conformationally very acceptable, but their growth is not to a level that I'm satisfied with. Well, realistically, to breed those sheep to a point that I'd feel comfortable selling, that it would be easy to sell rams to do more than they do more than one thing well.
Yeah.
Uh, you either look at different rams that will do that, or you just know, well, these daughters are going to go and we're producing daughters, and then those daughters are going to have to be bred to this ram to produce rams that we're able to sell easily. Um, I really enjoy digging through the data and the Excel sheets, and that breeding plan has probably changed 4 or 5 times
Hmm.
with more on the pedigree side of how do we tighten up our genetic pool in our independent sire lines, and how do we tighten those up, how do we look at some line breeding so that we can really tighten up those pedigrees and really tighten up those genetics more so from an internal use
Yeah.
standpoint. Um, I do miss the days when we just threw rams out. We went and found, operating as a commercial producer, we went out, we found good sheep that had traits that we wanted to use, and we took those rams, we dumped them out on all of the ewes, and we'd have, back then when there were only a handful of sheep, you'd have a single sire mating group, but you'd get 60 lambs
Hmm.
out of one ram.
Yep.
Whereas now we've talked about it, there might be 4 or 5 breeding groups, and it's like, oh man, you walk into the barn. It was fun to see consistency
Hmm.
across uh, one sire or a sire family, and those were fun because it took the effort out of planning, took that effort out of it. But I enjoy that. I think it ultimately comes back for the commercial producer. Can you find the best ram for your operation? And if so, can you afford to go get him? And when that happens, because you're keeping your ewe lambs out of that elite ram,
Hmm.
going out and finding those genetics and sourcing those genetics outside the flock, and then identifying some of those ram lambs maybe that are being born internally, and using those to propagate genetics that are working in your environment. Um, yeah, it's huge. So yeah, awesome that you've got it all figured out, and it sounds like you've got 2 rams that you're going to be able to select from. I think the neat thing when we look at a genetic evaluation, you've got one ram that you're a little nervous to use because you raised him, and is he gonna are those numbers going to hold up? Is he going to produce lambs to the same level that a ram that you bought in from someone who's been raising sheep for a long time in the breed, that's proven, has
Yep.
a very positive reputation. The nice thing is that if you look at it more as an opportunity to challenge that ram lamb, you put your ram lamb in there, and all of a sudden his lambs are excelling and maybe improving over uh over that other ram lamb that you bought in, and maybe those numbers change.
Yep.
Maybe the perception of that ram changes. He could also do just terribly next to him, um but we're proving those genetics out, and
Yep.
that long term.
Yep.
So yeah, that's super super exciting. I certainly love the dynamic of, we have a threshold set, in your breeding system. Threshold is set. These are getting bred for replacements. These are getting bred for ram lamb seed stock production. There's a bottom end. And why should I make those purebred sheep when we could capitalize on hybrid vigor and a terminal sire to produce very acceptable lambs for the market in the spring?
Yeah. It's kind of funny because there was a time I would have been pretty excited to get a lamb that was a -40 on parasite resistance because we had so many that were just, +50s and +60s and +100s and so it's kind of funny how that the threshold part of it, I guess, has really changed over time. And now I look at those -40s, even though they're well above breed average, it's still now that's not where we want to be. I don't really see a point in producing those lambs. And the other part of it too is I don't feel all that comfortable to sell somebody a ewe lamb that's a -40 and then tell them, yeah, it's parasite resistant, because to me it's not. It has some parasite resistance, and I feel pretty bad. Those people took them home, and then they have all kind of problems with parasites later down the road because there isn't as much parasite resistance in that plant as there should be. So that's another part of it, I guess, because when I sell somebody sheep, I want them to succeed. I want them to be very happy. And when somebody says, "Hey, where'd you get those sheep?" I want them to say, "Oh, you need to go to Big Tom Perkins. He sells you good stock." That's what we want. It's
Yeah,
you can't just
and
take
I
their
think,
and walk away.
yeah, I think too that if we take the numbers out of the equation
Hmm.
and we just look at kind of the management that you're forcing those sheep into.
Yep.
So September breeding to lamb in February, you're wanting them to catch in 17 days.
Yep.
And I made the comment to you that, if they fall out of that 17-day, if they don't catch within that time period, and the rams are fertile, would I call them right away? No, I wouldn't. You've got another group that they can fall into
Yeah.
later this year to lamb later in the spring. Um, but is there a way to mark those sheep on paper, maybe a separate ear tag, an ear notch that says, hey, we gave you a chance that I would consider to be in season
Yep.
breeding. September, we're getting close enough. Those days are shortening. Temperatures tend to drop. It is a natural breeding season,
Hmm.
our in season breeding. If you can't get it done in 17 days, well, maybe we need to mark you. Maybe one strike against you. I'm not saying those are bad sheep, but you do that a second time, say next year, we
Yep.
try to push you back into that September lambing group. You don't do it again. If there is a short list for calling, maybe
Hmm.
that one slips up into there. If you're really
Yep.
digging for sheep
Yep.
that you've got to move. The other aspect of it is, hey, you're getting bred later in the season. We'll breed you to Sam and Suffolk Ram,
Hmm.
and because you'll produce twins and raise them and be a great ewe. But I don't need to propagate genetics, those fertility
Yep.
genetics
Yep.
that maybe aren't up to standard. We don't need to propagate them. So I think that's kind of a neat thing to kind of push those sheep and ask them to operate at a high level. Um, so that's just another aspect. Again, numbers aside, those sheep have value outside of their EBVs. The other
Yeah.
question
Go ahead.
on your ram lamb selection, what were the two that you selected phenotypically, I'm assuming, what were the characteristics of the one you chose to keep versus the one that you didn't?
The one that I chose to keep was just a lot stockier, um, which is not really a term, I guess, but it just had a better rump on it, a much broader rump, and its front end, its shoulders, I guess, were just thicker.
He
And
looked like a ram.
he looked more like a ram. Yeah. The other, and all of my sheep, none of my sheep, well, none of my lambs, I should say, this year looked fantastic. They did a while ago, but it's gotten so dry. They all just look kind of, I don't know, lanky, I guess. I don't know what the term is. They're just none of them have really filled out like you'd like to see them by this time of the year. I think they will, give it time. I think they'll be fine. But they just kind of started out here just, I don't know, a month and a half ago. And I just kept looking at them. I'm like, I just don't think they look good. And so with this 466 standing there looking, he's probably out of the 10 rams that are out there now, he is by far the stockiest, the rammiest looking one. And like I said, I pulled the numbers first, and then went out and looked at those two, and was pretty quick to decide, yeah, that was the way I wanted to go. And I've had some other people look as well and ask, after I've already made the breeding decision, but ask their opinions, and they all picked the 466 over the 402. So that was what I went with. So I'm pretty happy
Yeah,
with that. And if I can get those kind of characteristics to translate into the young stock, I'll be pretty happy with those.
any differences in scrotal circumference or
I didn't
anything
measure them.
noticeable?
I haven't measured them. I just kind of eyeballed, and said to me they were both satisfactory.
Perfect.
Kind of thing. There wasn't, any visible difference. I could have measured them. Maybe there's a few centimeters here or there, but I just
Right.
I just looked at
Right.
it and said, yeah, those will work. You know.
Yeah. When that's something I think a lot of times we can overlook.
Hmm.
We get so focused on confirmation of the just skeletal structure, muscling,
Yep.
that there was a ram lamb out in the field the other day that has just been a standout from early on. It has looked good, has been big, and he was walking away the other day, and just an uneven
Yep.
scrotum.
Yeah.
That testicular development is uneven. One side doesn't look good, other side looks great. And it's like, man, if I was just looking at confirmation of that animal and muscling and skeletal structure, I probably would have missed that. And I
Yeah.
think that is something that, that trait in and of itself, we know is linked to fertility and reproductive traits in
Yep.
the daughters. And
Yeah.
so
You're gonna make me go
that's
out
an
and look
easy
again
thing.
now. You're gonna
Yeah,
make me go out and look
yeah,
again.
go
It's
out and
like, yeah, like,
double check.
yeah,
Yep,
I'm
for
really gonna
sure,
look hard
for
now
sure.
because I'm
Yeah,
thinking,
but
no, I
it's
look.
something where I've had to retrain my eye
Yep.
to like, let's start there, and let's, as long as they're acceptable on their feet, they can move. Um, we'll go straight to that scrotal development, look there, and then let's assess the other items. Because
Yep.
ultimately, it can be the most beautiful sheep that we've ever seen. And if he doesn't have the ability to breed, or has physical restraints in his capacity to
Mm.
breed, then we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot with that. But yeah, that's just something that, again, I think some of it is, if you grew up learning to evaluate sheep um, in market classes or market animals, most of the time those are wethers. So that
Yep.
our eyes don't go towards
Yep.
scrotal development because there isn't anything there.
Yep.
We're trained to look at those physical characteristics of muscling and skeletal conformation. So yeah, I think it's awesome though. You got a sheep that you feel is worth producing lambs out of, and again, comparing those against proven genetics, I think is super exciting. But
Mm.
the other advantage I think we should note, by splitting up your breeding groups to lamb 3 to 4 times a year, we should have increased capacity in those ram lambs to breed multiple rounds of sheep
Yep.
throughout the year.
Yeah.
Versus, if you've got 160 ewes and you want to use 2 rams, well, they're going to be hard pressed to breed 80 apiece. It's
Yep.
not going to happen.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that's exciting. It's always an exciting time of year.
Yep. I'm super excited. We'll see what happens. And of course, getting ready to put them in this Saturday, and then comes the long 5 months of waiting to see what occurs. You know,
Yep, definitely.
there's that part of it. So, we thank you for listening to another episode of the Grazing Sheep podcast. There's a Facebook page. There's a YouTube channel. We're slowly getting videos put up on that. And got any questions, comments, you can reach out to me at bigtomperkins@gmail.com. So it's been good catching up with you and talking about breeding. It's always a fun thing to do. And we'll catch you next week then there, Cam.
Sounds good, Tom.
All right.